She arrived at my gatehouse in the last hour of light, with the cold coming in hard off the northern ridge, and the yard already going gray with it. I was crossing from the armory when I saw her, a woman on foot, a worn pack over one shoulder, standing at the gate and speaking quietly to my steward. No wolf beside her, no escort, no colors on her cloak, told me she carried no pack's name. She was slight and straight-backed, face composed in the way of someone who had learned not to let cold or hunger or the judgment of strangers move her features. She was asking, my steward told me later, for one night's shelter in the hall. She would work for it in the morning, whatever work the hold needed, and then she be on her way. That was all she asked. One night and the chance to earn it. I should have kept walking. I had a council meeting waiting, and 3 border reports unread on my table. But I stopped, because my wolves stopped. I keep 12 wolves in the yard at Stonemark. Great northern animals, gray and quiet, trained since their first winter to be indifferent to strangers. They had turned away a dozen women my council had brought to the hold in the 2 years since my Luna's death, circling wide, going flat-eared and still whenever someone new came through the gate. I had long since stopped apologizing for them. They were better judges than I was, I had decided. They had not been wrong yet. As this woman stood at the gate, speaking to my steward, every one of them drifted toward her across the yard. Not quickly. Not the way wolves move towards something they want to investigate. Slowly, as though they were being pulled by something they couldn't explain, and they had stopped trying to explain it. One sat, then another. By the time she noticed them and went still herself, 4 were at her feet, and 3 more were behind her steward, watching her face. She did not shriek. She did not step back. She looked down at the nearest one, a gray female named Dusk, who did not take bread from my own hand without earning it first, and she said, something too quiet for me to hear. Dusk pressed her great head against the woman's knee. I told my steward to give her the south room. Her name was Wren. She told me this at supper when I asked, and then she waited, the way people do when they expect the next question to be about where she came from and why she was alone. I did not ask it. It was her story to tell when she chose to. She worked the next morning as she had promised, harder than my own stable hands, quietly, without waiting to be directed. She had her pack ready to leave by midday. My steward found her in the yard, and I do not know what passed between them. But she set the pack down and stayed another day, and then another. I told myself it was the wolves. They would not settle when she was away from the yard. Dusk had taken to sleeping outside the south room door. Dusk had never done for anyone, not even me. My great wolf, a silver animal I called Solus, who had gone quiet after my Luna died and had not, in 2 years, pressed close to any living soul, came down from the high kennel on the 3rd morning and put his head in her hands while she was drawing water at the well, and stayed there so long she had to set the bucket down and simply stand with him. I watched from the upper window and felt something shift in the center of my chest that I did not have a name for yet. Something like warmth, older. Something that felt less like a feeling beginning, and more like a feeling that had been waiting a long time to be recognized. She had been 6 months on the road. I learned this not from her but in pieces. The way you learn anything true about a person with dignity, slowly, from the edges. Her mate had gone. She did not say it bitterly. She said it the way you might describe weather, matter-of-factly, with no expectation that I would take it as my burden to be shocked on her behalf. She had a son. He was safe, she said. With her sister's Pactus holds to the south, she was rebuilding. She was working her way back to enough security, enough standing, enough of a foundation to send for him. She had not asked anyone for enough. She had only asked for one night at a time. I thought about that more than I should have in those first days. The particular courage of someone who has stopped and asked for more than they believe they can justify. Lord Verith of the Eastfen arrived on the 6th day, unannounced, 6 riders, and a document citing old trade agreements that supposedly gave the Eastfen claim to any unaffiliated Omega sheltering in holds within the border corridor. He was the kind of man who carried papers to cover things he intended to do anyway. He stood in my great hall and told me he had heard I was housing a woman with no pack colors, and that the Eastfen had prior claim to her labor contract. I was sitting at the high table when he said it. I want to be precise about what's happened inside me in that moment, because I have spent a great deal of time since then trying to understand it. It was not rage exactly. Though rage was present, it was something more specific. The feeling of a door slamming in a house you did not know you had been living in. The feeling of something being threatened that you have already decided. Without ever putting the decision into words, you would not allow to be threatened. Solas, who was lying at my feet, rose, I said. She is under my protection, Vareth smiled. The way men smile when they believe they hold the better document. He began to describe the terms of the agreement. I let him finish, because I am a fair man and he was a guest in my hall, and then I said it again, more clearly. She is under my permanent protection, Lord Vareth. She carries Stonemark's name from this hour. If your agreement has anything to say to that, I will hear it, but I suggest it does not. The hall had gone quiet. My court stood in 2 rows along the walls, stewards, captains, the wolves, the pack's elders, who had come in from the outer hold that morning, and were now watching, with expressions I could not fully read. Vareth looked from me to Solas, who was still standing, and then at the wolves ranged behind me, and he made the correct decision. He folded his document, he bowed stiffly, and he left. She had been standing near the side door. She had heard everything. I crossed the hall toward her. And I did not think about what I was doing, which was perhaps the most honest I had been with myself in years. The bond was fully awake now. The mate bond, the things Wolf had been circling for 6 days. And it was not a surge or a fire or any of the words I had once used for it when I was young. It was a settling. A long, slow settling, like a joint returning to its socket after years out of place. Like arriving somewhere you had been traveling toward without knowing it. I stopped in front of her. She was looking at me steadily. Eyes were clear. You came here asking for 1 night, I said. I did, she said. I would like to ask you to stay longer than that, I said. Not as a laborer, as my mate if you are willing. My court witnesses it. My wolves have already decided, and Solas has never once been wrong. She looked at Solas. He was beside me now, his great silver head level with my hip, and he was watching her with the particular patience of a creature who has already chosen, and is simply waiting for the choosing to be mutual. She looked back at me. I came here with nothing, she said. You came here with everything, I said. Was the one who had been sitting in an empty hall not knowing what was missing. She was quiet for a long moment. I did not press her. I had meant it. The choice was entirely hers. I would have extended the protection regardless. What I was asking for was something different, and she knew the difference. And I wanted her to know that I knew she knew it. Then she held out her hand. The mate mark bloomed between us, pale gold on both our wrists, the warmth of it spreading up my arm like the first real warmth of a fire after a long cold season, and the hall around us went to one knee. Every captain, every elder, the steward who had almost turned her away. The wolves lay down as one, Dusk and Solas side by side, and the low sound that moved through them was something between a sigh and a chord of music. She sent for her son the following morning. I will not describe what it was to stand in the yard and watch her face when the cart came through the gate and she heard him call her name. That was hers. Some moments belong only to the people inside them. But I will say this. She had spent 6 months rebuilding alone, asking only for 1 night at a time, and she had never once let the difficulty of it become the whole of who she was. She had kept going with the particular, quiet faith of someone who does not yet know what they are walking toward, but trusts that the walking is worth it. She had not been walking toward rescue. She had been walking toward a life she was building herself, piece by piece, night by night, and she had arrived at my gate, and my wolves had simply recognized what her own long faithfulness had already made her. I was the one who had needed finding. She knew this. She told me so gently, on the night she accepted my name, and she laughed when she said it. A real laugh, full and unhurried. And I thought, there it is. There is the thing that was missing from this hall. Stonemark had never been quieter, and it had never been more full.